Hey everybody, Cody Menz here again. I'm going to be doing this, probably it's going to turn out to be a somewhat lengthy video, of going through pretty much all the unreleased tanks currently in the game files for the 1.15 or 1.15 common test server. So this patch will be coming out essentially, I believe, December 7th to the 8th, and then, you know, holiday ops starts right after that, you know, most likely December 9th or the 10th. So pretty much, you know, for tanks that we're kind of expecting to be in the holiday ops boxes would, or should, kind of be on the common test server at this point, you know, in the game files somewhere. So, you know, who knows, like some of these tanks probably will be coming out for holiday ops. Whether it's, you know, maybe they'll sneak a tier 9 premium in there, or it will just be tier 8 premiums. Usually they have 2 tier 8 premiums that are somewhat new. You know, typically, you know, I think one's going to be the American, you know, premium leading into the new Yo tanks that'll come out early next year. But otherwise, usually they throw in like a new low tier tank and like a couple, you know, mid tiers and stuff like that. 3D styles. But in any event though, let's get started. No gameplay with, you know, this video. Basically, we're just going to go through all the unreleased tanks. Some of these, you know, might be basically battle pass tanks for next year, or maybe some other special events. All right, so in any event though, let's get this up here. There we go. It's a little finicky, you know, the way that, you know, I'm able to get this to show up. So it doesn't work 100%, you know, with these mods. In any event though, I'm going to go from Russia down and kind of go tank by tank. So the first one here, so this has been in the files for quite some time, the T-44 lightweight. It's kind of interesting, you know, this was unreleased and it's been unreleased for quite some time. I don't feel like we'll see this anytime soon. Maybe they'll throw it in like a black market, because this tank, I believe, was contemplated to be entered in when they extended light tanks to tier 10 and rebalanced some. You know, basically, and it just never made it in. But basically, it's a light version of the T-44 A model here, which, as I'm babbling on here, might be worthwhile to kind of read the info that they have over here. But this is basically a light version. And, you know, this tank, you know, versatile light tank, only 180 damage, 180 millimeters of pen. Okay hit points, and since it's a T-44, it actually has a little bit of armor to it. So, you know, it's kind of, I guess, the LTTB beat this thing out, you know, to enter the tech tree. But otherwise, okay view range, you know, pretty, you know, okay for a tier 8 light. And, you know, this tank, I don't think we'll see this. This is kind of one of those that are left over, but maybe it'll show up in the black market at some point. Next up, so I'm just going to, for my own sanity, I'm just going to go basically, you know, left to right, top to down. This one, I believe, came into game files earlier this year in 2020. The M485. So this one is basically, you know, from my understanding, a T-34, I guess, mounted, you know, with, what is it, an 85 millimeter gun. And, yeah, it's kind of quirky. You know, this I could see possibly being in the holiday ops boxes as kind of like a quirky mid-tier tank that they release. Or down the road, maybe they'll, if like we ever see Homefront back or something, this could be like, you know, some sort of reward tank for like a mini marathon or like a special little event or something. But otherwise, you know, it's your run-of-the-mill typical, you know, Russia throws something onto an American tank, you know, when they did the Lend-Lease program. Next up, we've got, it's really hard for this thing to, come on, expand. There we go. Next up is, so the T-44-85 and the T-44-122. I'm not going to focus too much on these. Where these tanks, again, these have kind of been in game files for quite some time. It's your typical T-44 clone. You know, this one with an 85 millimeter, and then the other one with a 122 millimeter gun. Doubtful that we'll see these, you know, basically in the holiday ops boxes. But otherwise, you know, these have kind of been, you know, floating around for quite some time in the game files and just never were released. Moving into, so now this one's somewhat newer. At some point we're definitely going to see this, the K91-2. So we did see this year with the Battle Pass the K91 PT, the Tier 9 basically tank destroyer, based off of the K91. This variant, has a somewhat central mounted turret. Gun only does 250 damage, 212 penetration for its standard round, and it's a little bit different than the two K91s we already have. This one, I guess it's a possibility that we might see it in the holiday ops, kind of as like not the main featured tier 8 tank if they throw two tier 8s in, but kind of like the B tank. This one, it's basically been in since early 2021, late 2020 as far as the game files, and there doesn't seem anything I guess broken about it. They balanced it and it's kind of finished model wise and everything, just waiting to be released, whether it's just a straight sale, maybe advent calendar, maybe just a sale next year and they're kind of holding it back, or a holiday ops tank. Let's throw in, so next up, so all these I'm going to skip. All of these T-44s basically are typically exclusive to the Russian server, and the number or letters here signify you usually get these tanks with a deal basically for your internet cable provider. And basically the T-44-100s, come with that subscription as long as you have that internet cable provider. The Object 590, so this is a tier 9 medium tank. This tank possibly, I would say, would be a battle pass tank for next year. For any of these tier 9s that you're going to see, there's always the possibility of them, being in the holiday ops if they throw a tier 9 into the mix, or maybe added into the holiday ops like mode, in some way, shape, or form that's not in a box, maybe a grind or something. Who knows what they're gonna do? But this might be a battle pass tank if they add in like 2, 3, 4 or whatever, new tier 9s into the mix next year. This was basically a prototype, from the early 60s, so it definitely is a bit more modern. 100mm gun, so 320 damage, your typical, Russian, high tier medium. And then otherwise, so pretty poor gun depression, pretty poor accuracy. When it comes to the armor, it's actually got pretty good armor on it. So obviously sloped like a lot of Russian tanks, but pretty thick, and the cupolas aren't too big, albeit you can pen them. I don't think that they're too strong, but otherwise this tank, it looks like it might need like a little bit more tweaking, and this one's been in the game files since earlier this year too. But I'd say this is more likely going to be like a battle pass tank. Moving on, so after the 590, 907 is nothing new, 907A as well. There's the KV-1 Shielded. This one came kind of mid to late 2021. This also could be a holiday ops like little mid-tier tank, since they usually include at least 1 or 2 kind of mid-tiers to kind of flesh out the holiday ops boxes. Otherwise, we could see it come in some sort of like mini special event next year. Because this seems like something easy when it comes to the KV-1 Shielded. They threw a couple little, I guess, extra armor on it, specifically the turrets. The turret, it looks like, and also it looks like the side of the hull. They introduced a bit more armor onto it. Specifically, it looks like here and there, and then basically the sides of the turrets. So kind of interesting. Otherwise though, it it equips the 76mm gun. All right, so getting back here, Russia has the most tanks, just FYI. Come on, Russia, America, and Germany. So moving down, bear with me here. So the Kirovets 1, this one I doubt will come at all. This could be one of those that we might see, thrown into like a black market, kind of like when they did the awful Panther, tank not released. It's kind of just sitting in the game files. This has been in the game files for like ever. I don't think they'll ever release it. It's just kind of, I feel like, forgotten about, but you never know. They could throw it in at some point. Come on. But that's basically your typical IS-3 prototype, that tank. There's also the 703-2 100mm. This tank, they were considering using 100mm instead of the 122 that ultimately got released last year, you know, with the Object 703-2, with the 122mm. So this one's just kind of left over in game files. You know, it's balanced, it's finished game model wise, everything. This could be another thing where maybe they'll release it like later on, black market, bond shop, something, where there's not like any specific point to this tank, you know, outside of it's just kind of left over. Doubtful that they'll release it like in a holiday ops box because it's kind of redundant, you know, with the other premium being out there already. And then moving down, so now we have a possible Battle Pass tank again, or just straight release. I'd say with the Battle Pass, like they released the Object 777 version 2 this year, more likely we'd see the Russian Tier 9 medium that I showed a little bit ago. This tank is a auto reloader, from my understanding, or maybe it's a straight auto loader. In any event though, I'm just making sure, yeah, autoloader. So I thought it was auto reloader. So it's an autoloader, 34 seconds, complete reload. So kind of low DPM, pretty crap accuracy, high aiming time, but you know, 390, you know, damage, and it has a really small turret, which from my understanding on this, so turret armor 330 millimeters, it's got the basically turret kind of like a oscillating turret like the Frenchies, so it does have really thick armor here on the front, and this part kind of pivots up and down, so it does actually have good gun depression, has kind of weird gun elevation, so it's kind of an interesting Russian tank. This, you know, if they throw it into the holiday ops for a tier 9, wouldn't surprise me. This one kind of got finished earlier in 2021 here, or it could just be like a straight sale or something. I doubt it will be a Battle Pass tank just because, you know, they already released one Russian heavy tank with it. But it's kind of compact. And with that, when it comes to the speed, it's got okay speed. Specific power is not super great though. So it's kind of like an interesting tank. It's definitely a very unique Russian tank. Crew-wise, it does match some of the Russian tanks too. Not all of them. Like, it doesn't match the IS-7 line, from my understanding. So moving on here. Trying to keep this video short, but it's probably going to be a really lengthy video here with the amount of tanks that are just floating around. 257 PA, so that was before they moved 257 down to tier 9. There's the Object 780 here. So this tank could possibly be like a Clan War reward tank. Yeah, this one is again another 1960s tank, and it's a modification of the Object 777 or Object 775 rocket tank. So, you know, this tank has a 130mm gun on it, and you know, it does 490 damage, got really high penetration when it comes to the standard, you know, round, decent, you know, decent accuracy and aiming time for a tank, you know, with that pen. I feel like, you know, this could be like the next Clan War tank, and it's got really thick turret armor, small hatches, angled, and it kind of fits the bill, you know, for that, to be completely honest. And it's fast. Specific power is not great, but it's, you know, it's okay for a heavy like this. Good V range. You know, so it's definitely an interesting tank. This is one of the, I guess, the most modern tanks, but it does have a really small crew. You know, it's definitely interesting. You know, this would be a really good tank. I guess I didn't specifically look at the armor models, but it would all hinge on, I guess, how strong the cupolas are, because the frontal armor definitely looks like it's basically at near ricochet, you know, auto bounce angle here. So really you'd have to be shooting heat at the front. But in any event though, this, you know, most likely will be a Clan War tank if I had to guess. It's moving down. I think we got one more. Yeah, so The KV for KTTS, this has been, we actually have two more, but this one's been in the game files forever. Like forever, ever. Really large crew, 107mm gun. Who knows what the hell they'll ever do with this. I think they never released it because it was determined that this is just, it was terrible to play. This could be something black market, you know, down the road. I don't think they'll ever sell this because unless they like buff it or something, it's just really big, quirky, and from my understanding, even though the armor's, you know, it's listed pretty good, I believe this is a pretty big weak spot, and people just determined it was just too weird to play, and it's just been in the game files as long as I've known. And last but not least, if I can actually get this to go up one more time, is the Object 268 version 5. So this is actually a tank destroyer in the Object 268 hull that we all know. Kind of similar to the rank battle reward, you know, the Chinese TD that they're releasing, where this does have a turret on it. So 750 high pen with being a TD, okay, accuracy, poor gun depression, decent DPM, but when it comes to the armor's okay on this. You know, it's kind of, it's a really flexible Russian TD, which you don't really think of a lot of Russian TDs like that, you know, with the turrets and whatnot. So it's kind of an interesting tank to where, you know, this down the road could possibly be something for rank battles. You know, if they're going to keep with tier 10s or possibly like a clan war reward tank, because I don't think they'd go back-to-back TDs for rank battles. But overall, though, this has actually been in the files from, I think it's been almost like 2 years now. Otherwise, though, I don't think there's any more for Russia here. So let's pop into a different nation. So Germany here. So they have the PZ-35R here to kind of start off with this. This little tank could possibly, you know, be like a free tank that they give out for holiday ops. Or it could just be, you know, one of the low tier tanks that they throw in the bundles as well. You know, so in any event, though, this kind of seems like a Seal Clubber tank in a sense, because it does have pretty good armor. It's based off of the, you know, R35 Renault tank, which has decent armor. Just has a different turret and gun on it, you know, from what I can gather here. So moving onward, you also have the PZ-M15. Hopefully some of these tanks I'm just not like missing. I'm trying to remember if, you know, these have been released before on other servers. This tank, you know, again, you never know what low tiers they throw into the holiday ops box. They've thrown a low tier like tier 2, tier 3 every single year. This could also, you know, be one of them. I'm not going to focus too much time on the lower tier tanks just because, you know. So the VK that just got released, there's also a tier 8 awful Panzer 5. The tier 7 already got released, so the awful Panzer Panther. The tier 8 one, you know, up tiered, different stats. Kind of surprised, you know, that there was 2 different ones, but this one, yeah, I feel like this is just kind of gonna hang out in the game files, you know, pretty much for quite some time. Who knows if they'll ever release it. I guess there's a possibility, you know, because the game model of this was actually updated. If you're taking a peek at that, and then we'll go back to the tier 7 one that was released, just so you can see both of them here. So they actually use, you know, basically the same file or the same model here. The guns are balanced differently, but that's where, you know, the tier 8 one's finished. So it's kind of, will they ever, you know, throw the tier 8 one out here, like the black market, bond shop, something? But most likely that tier 8 one's just going to kind of hang out in the garage. Otherwise, so I guess scanning down here, there is this other tank here that's been floating around for a while, the VK6501H. I think this was like 2019, 2020 it kind of entered, and they just haven't, you know, released it at this point. You know, this is another small possibility for just being one of those tanks thrown in there, but likelihood, I'd say this is just, I guess they had some plans for something, and there's quite a few like mid-tier tanks that have just been hanging out in the game files for some time. There's the Tiger 217 that I don't think this was ever released at this point, or maybe it was and I guess never picked it up. But yeah, surprisingly, like I've remembered this for the past several years and it just never made its way out. And so there's the Tiger 2H. This is very unlikely, but basically a premium tier 7 Tiger. I feel like this was kind of the basis of like the Capture King Tiger. Just them testing stuff internally, and you know, this is just kind of left over in game files. Come on, come on. There we go. VK 4502B7. So this one, a tier 7 VK 4502 with the rear turret. Yeah, this is another one that's been in the game files for quite some time. It's got a really dinky gun. And yeah, this is just kind of sitting, you know, in the game files for a while. I don't think we'll ever see that, along with this unreleased VK 101B. And then there's also a prototype Jagdtiger. So the German ones are kind of boring compared to the Russian ones. This has been in the files for several years too. Basically a tier 8 Jagdtiger, which actually would be pretty freaking awesome. But you know, likelihood of us seeing this is pretty low again. I'm trying to cover, come on, every tank air. And there's also, so this one has been released. I won't even view it. The Kang Panzer, or Jagdpanzer 105. This one has an 8.8 centimeter that they originally released. Some people have this, and it's terrible. And then they re-released it with the 105 and sold it. This is actually a tank I think is pretty likely we might see in the bond, or not the bond, black market, because people would possibly collect it. I know I would probably bid and try to buy it, just because you can't get it any other way. People had the option, I believe, to keep it or trade it in when they re-released it. I think that's the case. And last but not least, there's the Waffentrager E-100 that's still in the game files. Doubtful we'll ever see this. However, it is on the Chinese server, which is why you know, I believe this is in the game files. Sure, there's a chance, you know, they may release it at some point, but I doubt it. They did kind of nerf it when it comes to the magazine. I believe it used to have 6, but I could be wrong. But otherwise, the Chinese server, if I'm not mistaken, you can still get that in some way, shape, or form. So, getting back to some more interesting tanks again, the Americans. So there's this quirky little tier 3 tank, the T3 Convert. This, you know, being kind of quirky, and knowing their, I guess, older, or a previous holiday ops low tier tanks, this one could be, you know, something when it comes to them throwing one in, you know, because it's kind of quirky, different, and you know, I could see them throwing that in, you know, instead of the other low tier tanks that we've seen thus far, because otherwise there's not really any use, or if they give it away for free. This tank's actually been in for quite some time, so this not going to come out. So M48 T54E2, and there's even like a little bit longer name, the T123E6. So this tank's actually been in basically the game files since like 2012, 2013 or so. This was back when Wargaming was actually considering, I guess, adding in like smoothbore, you know, basically guns, and basically moving, you know, a little bit further, you know, the needle as far as they go. But this is basically, I guess, a test bed to where they were testing specifically like the gun, and I believe, you know, it's just basically sat in the game file since then. And ultimately, obviously, they decided not to bring so like smoothbore guns. This I don't think is actually a, you know, specifically a smoothbore gun that's on there, but they were considering basically, you know, adding, I guess, the next era of tanks in. But this tank's just been kind of a placeholder, I guess, for testing purposes, and it's been sitting in the game files since then. Looks, much like the T-125. Now, that's a clan war tank. There's this tank, which I think is all but guaranteed to be in the Holiday Ops boxes. This is the premium tier 8 heavy tank, and next year we're getting the Yo tanks. They're kind of nicknamed, and essentially, they're due out probably the first patch of next year, so end of January, February-ish. This tank most likely we're going to be seeing in the Holiday Ops boxes. And when it comes to this tank, really good gun depression, pretty good gun, and pen. Not the best, accuracy, okay DPM, but it's got pretty good armor. And much like that one Russian tank that we saw earlier, the turret essentially, so this doesn't move armor wise, only this part of the turret, being an oscillating turret, basically moves up and down. It does have a weak spot though, on the top with the cupola, much like most American tanks. And when it comes to the whole armor, it is pretty sloped, and it's it's fairly thick, but you'll want to definitely use your gun depression. Quirky tanks, but overall though, like, this is, I'd say, all but guaranteed, considering they typically do that when it comes to Holiday Ops. They put a new premium to kind of promote the tank line. It's going to be coming just after it. So I'd say, like, this is definitely like a 75+% chance that this will be one of the key premium tanks in there. Otherwise, though, that's it for the Americans. We'll pop down to the Frenchies, because the Frenchies, so the protos are already been released. However, there is the Lorraine 40T here, so, or 50T, excuse me. This, I believe, will be a battle pass tank for next year. It's a tier 9 heavy tank, 120mm gun, pretty good penetration. It's kind of similar, to me, to the AMX M4 51, 54 that's already in the game. Good gun depression, really good accuracy, low DPM though, decent turret armor, really bad hull armor though, based off of the Lorraine chassis. Mobility is fan-freaking-tastic and specific power, so you're like a massive, you're just this massive, like, unarmored hull, heavy tank. The gun hits pretty hard, good pen, good accuracy, low DPM though. I feel like they might tweak the stats a little bit, but I think this is pretty likely to be one of the battle pass tanks for next year if they stick with the tier 9 format. Otherwise though, so Britain, so they have this weird tank, the Matilda LVT. These came out, I think, in like October, super tested. The Matilda, and there's a couple other tanks, I forget the other couple, but this tank, 75mm gun on it, and it's basically, I guess, an Australian tank. And yeah, it's kind of interesting that they have quite a few like mid-tier tanks like this. Possible you might see them in Holiday Ops, maybe a special event, next year, based around like, maybe more historical stuff. All right, so moving down, you have the Cobra. This tank, I think, is going to be a battle pass tank as well. Game models basically finished in this tank. This one specifically, so really good pen, okay damage per shot, good gun depression, not the best DPM or accuracy, but turret armor and hull armor, while this isn't the most angled, the turret armor is actually pretty good given the slopes on it and the gun depression. Mobility is okay too on it, but overall, it's got, I guess, an oscillating turret from the looks of it too. It's an interesting tank. This has kind of been balanced and finished to where, I think it's going to be a battle pass, tank, unless they slip a tier 9 into the Holiday Ops boxes. And when it comes to the gun, it has a 4-round auto loader on top of that too. So definitely a lot of, punch, behind that, but your DPM kind of suffers, as well as, your accuracy just a little bit. So this is definitely kind of an interesting tank, and doesn't really look, British, but this one's kind of been balanced and kind of finished off. The Caliban here, this is quirky and weird. they could put this in, you know, holiday ops. You know, most likely that American tank's going to be in there. So, you know, they could throw this in only because I guess people would want this just for the sheer, I guess, quirkiness of it. Like, I don't know if this is going to be great or not, because the main feature of this tank is, so it's got basically a derp gun. You know, like it's kind of weird that they came out with this, especially after the HE changes. So you have 292 for the premium, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So let me actually throw this into the comparison tool, because I think it's actually a heat round, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it's actually an AP round. So you have HE for your standard, and then basically your premium AP. There's no other standard round. Whoops, I actually exited out of it. Bad, Cody. Let's throw ourselves in here. But overall though, like this tank, it's just kind of weird because the HE round has a lot of pen. It's like a mini like FV4005. You have okay DPM, but like really bad accuracy, terrible aiming time, like 4.5 seconds. Good gun depression though. And you actually have like some armor to it too. And the mobility is not terrible, low top speed. But it's just, it's interesting to see what they're going to do with this, because I don't think it's a tank that, you know, they'd sell like just directly, but you know, maybe they will. Or, you know, it's kind of a weird tank to do a marathon for, that where, you know, this could definitely be a possibility when it comes to, you know, the holiday ops, because they were balancing it kind of, you know, right before they did the American tanks. This one A43 like Black Prince prototype, this has been in the game files for like 4 or 5 years now. Not really sure what they plan on doing it, but you know, it's pretty finished. You know, game model wise, it's been finished for quite some time, stat wise. But you know, it's a down tiered, basically, you know, Black Prince. But only time will tell, you know, with that. Otherwise, so the unreleased tanks, you know, here finishing off Britain, don't know if we'll ever see these. So there's the Chieftain, you know, Chieftain Mk6 here, that's been sitting in the game files for a very, very long time. Who knows when the hell we'll ever see this thing. I'm hopeful that we'll see it someday, but you know, who the hell knows at this point. And then there's also, outside of the Chieftain, you know, T95 FV4201 that everybody knows, there's also this other Chieftain model as well, just the T95/Chieftain, that strangely enough is actually a lot more balanced than the T95 FV4201 Chieftain that we have, considering it actually has a little bit of a weak spot on top of its turret. It's a little bit more balanced overall, but this tank, who knows what the hell we'll ever, you know, see. Occasionally wargaming employees seem to screw up and play it from time to time. Like, it is a playable tank, like it's in the game files, but I don't think we'll ever see it released. Otherwise, no tanks for Czechoslovakia. Chinese tanks, really the only things here. So there's a WZ-113 version 2. This tank is, you know, from my understanding, it's just kind of a placeholder, you know, kind of left over. There's also the 113 Beijing Opera. This is a tank I guess we could see in the black market. You know, just it's basically just the special style here. This has been, you know, kind of in the game files for quite some time and available on a Chinese server, I believe, exclusively. There's the WZ-120 GFT. This tank was kind of, you know, it's been in for I think over a year or two now. Maybe we'll see them re-release it and put it back in, you know, in as a battle pass tank, you know, in the future if they ever bring it back, because they had pulled, I think this was the old tier 9 before the Object 263. I don't think it's a newer one. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I guess this is a possibility. I think that's the only way we would see, you know, that tank. And then this is the new battle pass, you know, or not battle pass, rank battle tank that Wargaming's already kind of featured, 114 SP2. So you'll start seeing those float around next time rank comes back up in 2022. Japanese tanks here. So this has kind of been in for a little while. The Kini Otsu. who knows when they'll bring this? Maybe it'll be the low tier holiday ops tank, but this has been in the game files I think for a couple years now. You know, who knows what they'll do at this point. I don't think they'll bring the anime Girls on Panzer tanks in any major form, because I think they'd have to renegotiate their contract to get those outside of the SEA server. Both of these tanks have been on for quite many years. Poland doesn't have anything kind of hanging around. We'll get to Sweden in a second because I just want to cross off Italians here. So Sweden, this is the other kind of nation that I think we could see either, so rank or not rank battles, battle pass tank with the Udes 033, but also this is my pick for kind of the second holiday ops tank. Not this one. This is the tier 9 Udes, kind of a typical, so 13 degrees, really good gun depression. It's got a pretty decent gun on it. Okay accuracy and DPM, really thin armor because it's all based off of basically angles, and mobility is actually decent on this. This tank I think will be a battle pass tank. Looks cool, looks like it'll actually be pretty fun to play. You know, basically, you know, based off of the Udes 3 project. I don't think it has, or maybe it does. It does have the hydropneumatic suspension. So yeah, it actually does have that. I didn't know if they kept that since it's been modified. But otherwise, you know, this tank seems like it's definitely going to be a battle pass tank. This is my pick for the other holiday ops tank, the Tornvagn. So this tank, it's weird. It's very weird. So they balanced this thing a while ago, you know, earlier in this year. But it's definitely a weird tier 8, but I think it's unique enough that people would really want it. And it would kind of fit in the holiday ops box with kind of, you know, goading people into getting something unique alongside that American tank. This tank though is so 120mm gun, hits hard, has a decent HE round too. You know, it's actually got okay penetration, you know, for a tier 8, and it's a basically assault heavy tank as far as the release, or not, as far as the assigned thing. But overall, the DPM's pretty low, accuracy's crap. So what's the point of playing this tank? So 10 degrees of gun depression is actually really good. But just look at the armor on this thing. It's insane. Like, it's got the really small turret. But it virtually, kind of like the Kronwagen, it does not really have any weak spots from my understanding. You know, it's really thick frontal armor. Like, it doesn't have much, you know, armor when it comes to the side of the hull, side of the turret and stuff. But it's virtually, from my understanding, doesn't really have any weak spots. You know, if you look at the armor model, especially when you're hull down. So it's got a really crap gun. Hits hard though. But you're basically like a hull down, you know, kind of fortress in a sense. Doesn't look like a fortress, but it's weird. It's quirky. You know, mobility is not great. It's actually pretty slow. Top speed wise and even specific power. Doesn't have the best view range either, but it's different. And it seems like it could be, you know, kind of like that B tank, you know, for holiday ops. Otherwise, I could see them, you know, selling it, or, you know, maybe doing a marathon down the road on it. But this tank's been finished balance, you know, balance wise, and it seems ready for release. You know, this is kind of my pick alongside the American tank for, you know, coming for the holiday ops boxes. All right, so tagging on to the end of this video, there's actually a few more, or actually 4 more tanks that I kind of skipped over earlier because they did not show up in the tech tree. So I'm tagging on to the end of this video. I got 4 more tanks here that are currently unreleased and, you know, possibly coming, you know, whether it's holiday ops or, you know, possibly a battle pass. So there's the AMBT. This is a tier 8 American premium medium tank. This tank actually has a auto reloader gun. So it's 105mm, you know, pretty good damage, somewhat low penetration. But you see the auto reloader here, which would be a first for an American tank. Okay accuracy, iffy DPM, but decent gun depression, good turret armor. Pretty good slope as well. And when it comes to the turret too, you do have a small cupola for an American tank, yay. Overall though, this tank, this is one of the newer ones, but they're actively balancing it, and they've changed it quite a few times here over the past month. When it comes to this tank, we might see it sooner rather than later. We'll see, I guess when Holiday Ops rolls around, if this is a tank that makes it, or if it gets, maybe it will be a sale next year or something, or a marathon or something. Otherwise though, getting to the next tank in the list, and these are all kind of hidden, from Wargaming. They kind of have I guess a few other ways to hide it because they didn't show up in the tech tree. This one I might have actually skipped over though. The WZ 113-2, this is actually a tier 8 premium version of the 113. I guess like a prototype, or a different variant that was actually a little bit weaker. This has a 100mm gun. When it comes to the armor, pretty well sloped. Most people know the 113. Decent turret armor, however it does have a pretty big cupola, and the gun's a little bit dinky given that it's a tier 8. Overall though, it has a pretty okay specific power and also top speed, but terrible gun depression at -4 degrees, but okay, DPM and armor. This is a tank that I could see, I doubt that they'd put this in the Holiday Ops boxes. This might be like a Chinese server tank that they release. Maybe they'll sell it or throw it in the black market or something. This is actually the previously removed tier 9. I was mistaken earlier. That other tier 9 TD that's currently, basically in there, that I had mentioned. Like, I didn't know if it was removed or not. It was a completely different nation and everything. Like, this is the Russian one that was removed. That's G12254. Who knows when or if they'll ever bring this back. It was actually a fun tank. I could see them bringing this back, possibly Battle Pass or, black market. It was a pretty fun tank. It's really mobile and, kind of small, compact. They had just removed it because it doesn't fit into the current line. Last but not least is the now tier 9 WZ 114 tank. This was a tier 8 premium tank, and then they changed it to tier 9 and gave it a giant gun. And this is basically rumored to be, a Chinese, I guess, exclusive tank to begin with. However, there was talks of it being tied to World of Tanks Plus, which is a subscription service where they give you this tank exclusively and a couple other rentals each month, along with some other bonuses such as like passive crew training and winning or basically earning gold back for playing more. Kind of a weird service that they're apparently going to test in the Chinese server. No, I guess it's just a rumor at this point. But this tank definitely seems like it'll fit on the Chinese server, given that they bumped it up to tier 9. It's got 530 alpha, really good penetration for, basically any heavy. 10 degrees of gun depression somehow. Really good accuracy at 0.32, okay DPM, fantastic turret armor, okay, actually, the whole armor, and pretty good view range on top of that, but it is a little slow. At least it's got that, it's a little slower when it rolls across to murder everybody. In any event, though, these are the last 4 tanks kind of tagging on to the end of this video. I forgot to kind of pull them up as I was doing the tech tree, and I was trying to cram them in as fast as possible because I know it's a very long video here. These 4, though, kind of have a hidden tag on them that they don't show up in the tech tree. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you have a very nice day, and I'll see you around in another video. Have a good one.